Richard, to start off with, I want to say it's a great honor and thank you very much for taking the time. I know you have a busy schedule. Let me just jump right into it. For the uninitiated, for the people at home watching who don't know what NLP is yet or who are brand new to NLP, what is NLP and what's in it for me?
NeuroLinguistic programming is really the systematic study of how conscious and unconscious activity results in successful behaviors. In the field of psychology, part of psychology, there was the idea that really came from Sigmund Freud that if you understood what went wrong with you, that somehow or other magically you would have this insight and your problems would disappear. Yeah. It's been tried for 50 years. I come from a background where we modeled human behavior and got machines to repeat it. That didn't exist a long time ago, but now it seems like a long time ago. Yeah. But what my forte was being able to take a successful behavior. I started out with psychotherapists who were getting results, but not systematically. Sometimes they would get a result and sometimes, but you couldn't like walk in and depend that if you had a phobia, you wouldn't. Yeah. And so there was nothing systematic. They did what they did, quote, intuitively. So I took the things that they did and only the times where it worked and found out how they were thinking and talking and directing other people. And I only took examples from different psychotherapies because I assumed if all the 160 schools of psychotherapy worked sometime, that what was working was more based on the neurology of people than on the theories. You know, there was Gestalt, DA, and all the Freudian, neo-Freudian, and I mean, there were so many of them, it was just ludicrous. And I just ignored all of that. And at a certain point in time, it just dawned on me that there was a better place to look, which is sometimes people made achievements on their own. And if we didn't look at these as pathology, but we looked at it as achievement, and if you're born with only two natural fears, then the others are learned. And sometimes people unlearn them. They learn to not be afraid of things. That's a successful behavior. And then I started looking at how people were good spellers versus bad spellers and worked with what were called educationally handicapped kids and started thinking that really my job is to make people smarter. And if I can teach you how to use your neurology the way they do, then you end up with the same successful behavior. I've worked with athletes. I've worked with the military. I've worked with intelligence agencies. I've worked with top salesmen in the country. I'll go in and take their best salesman, find out what he's doing that the others aren't doing, increase their close ratio. Yeah. I'm only interested in success. The theories of why these things work, I look into neurology. I read tremendous amount of that over the past 45, 50 years. Neurology has evolved as a science. They have better equipment. They know more about what's going on. They know more about our neurochemistry. So they know more about how we build neurocortical pathways and how we layer on top of them so that they're not running when we don't need them to run. Yeah. You know, like obsessive compulsive behaviors, where you lock the door and then lock it again and lock it again. There has to be a point where you're done and you move on.
Yeah. And if now somebody learns NLP, in what areas of their life can they use the techniques and what does it bring them?
That depends upon what techniques they learn. Yeah. We have a little bit for everybody. I've trained lawyers, I've trained medical doctors, that it's all about good communication. If you define good communication by a theory, then you have rules of how to do it properly. And even in school, when they teach you English, it's not necessarily the way people speak it. It's, they have rules and the rules are not really based on neurology. But you see, if you take a successful neurological function and you teach somebody else to do it, if you take a kid and you teach them to make pictures of words that are this big instead of having them memorize them the way they are in the paper. Yeah. I mean, you can always tell who does it because you ask them to spell something and they squint when they even just see the pictures inside their head. If we teach people to repeat successful behaviors, and there is no area on the face of the earth where that isn't a good idea. I mean, when I first started out, I had no idea that the military would come to me and go, look, we're training people all the time. Can you take our best our best pistol shooters? Can you take our best pilots? Can you take the guy who does sonar better than other people, model what he's doing and build a training program out of it so that as new people come up, we end up with a better military, you know, and what it does is it reduces the cost of training. You know, even the pistol shooting, it reduces the cost of ammunition. But if you can reduce the amount of time, energy, and get a better result, that's a successful training program. And NeuroLinguistic Programming, the prac course provides you the foundation tools to be able to do that. The master track provides you the tools to be able to model human behavior. Because I built a set of tools to teach people to do the kind of thing that I was doing, so that you could elicit a good strategy from somebody or a strategy that's not working and modify it so that people function better.
Yeah. You first spoke of schools and then of teaching. I realize a lot of the time the two don't go together too well. What do you think? How would the world change if NLP were actually taught in schools to kids?
Well, it would go by faster. That's one thing. We would teach, you know, at one time I even designed a school. Unfortunately, the government wouldn't let me do it because I had all these geniuses volunteering to work for free. Buckminster Fuller, and we were going to teach kids to read, write, do mathematics, and then start teaching them about architecture and aircraft design and stuff by the time they were 8, 9 years old. And they just, to them, they go, well, we have lesson plans and you have to follow them. And, you know, the lesson plan is not about the capability of the children. And we keep, in this country anyway, aiming at the lowest common denominator, right? We want a class that teaches all of these people words, and we call them second grade words, right? Rather than teaching them that all words are the same and it doesn't matter how many letters are in them, it's still one picture. And so, you know, it's not the fault of teachers. It's that when you get governments involved in structuring everything and they start building structures and thinking the structures are what and they go, well, there's kids that are failing at the structure we provide. So you call them educationally handicapped, or you say they're not too smart. What happens is you don't adjust the teaching to accelerate the people. You're not asking the question, how quick can they learn? How can I adjust my teaching to make it so it all goes by better and we get a better end result? They're all trying to get funding from the federal government and achieve things and unified tests, and they're worried about IQs and all of these things. I took a test in school and they pulled me out of college prep, you know, and, you know, I have a few PhDs, so that obviously wasn't a very good test. But at the time, the test was more important than the people. And because if they gave them the test, they got certain kind of money, and the people that were there, they only know so much. I mean, people can only teach what they know. And, you know, when I was in high school, my math teacher's name was Coach. That, you know, and it's not that he wasn't a smart guy, but he really didn't know anything about math. He just had to teach 7 classes. And so there's a difference between what funding can do. When you look at funding stuff and you build structures, it doesn't necessarily tell you what the best job is. It's not like running a business where you're trying to get the most profit out of something and the best result. Hopefully when, you know, that as you design things like jet planes, you want to keep making a better one. But if it was done by private industry, you'd want a better one and you'd want it built for less money. So it becomes more competitive. Federal government does it, and a coffee pot costs $125,000. That's just the nature of the animal. When you don't have to worry about money, then you don't. And when you have to sell that coffee pot to a lot of people, you know, and everybody goes down, and this coffee pot is $30, and this coffee pot's $75, and this one's $125,000, then, you know, you're not going to sell a lot of those coffee pots unless you sell them to the government. That's just the nature of the animal. NLP provides us the opportunity to look at things and to make them so that you function, so that the way you process information unconsciously and the way you process information consciously provides the maximum efficiency at whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. So that whether you're training salesmen or you're training kids to spell, you spend less time, you get a better result. Because when you put the right machine in somebody's head, then they can function better. It's just, if you try to spell phonetics, you can't even spell it phonetically in English. It's a ludicrous system.
So how do you put the right machine in? How does learning or changing actually work best?
How does it work best? When it's done well.
How's it done well?
It's done well by finding the best people that do something and finding out how they do it, and finding out how they think about it.
Yeah.
And if you train people to think like somebody who does something well, right, and so that they know what to look for, they know what to listen for, they know what to visualize in their head, and you train them so that it becomes an automatic behavior. You know, that there are some things that if you do them too consciously, they never work right, like drive a car.
Yeah.
Right? People drive best when they drive unconsciously and they practice it. But when you're teaching somebody to drive at first, it's all conscious. Like riding a bicycle, you know, you get on and you wobble, but eventually your feet know they're supposed to do this, and you're supposed to steer, and you're supposed to look ahead of you because the ground is coming, right? You're not supposed to look straight down, because if you look straight down, you won't see what's coming. And the faster the car goes, the further you look ahead. And the more you build that in so that it's intuitive, the better driver you build. And this is true in all humans. And especially like in the seminar we've been doing here, that, you know, there are people that tell me that they're terrified of snakes. Well, they don't know how to get over terrified. But I modeled people who did, who were extremely terrified and got over something, found out what they did instead of what psychologists did, and it just worked better.
What did they do?
Well, I mean, it varies from person to person, but basically they stopped and they looked at themselves being terrified and thought, I'm going to be doing this for years, until it looked so stupid they couldn't stand it anymore. And then at that point in time, many of them took the memory and they shrank it down, because most of the things people are afraid of, it's not that somebody is afraid of spiders. You start talking about spiders and they're terrified, and there's no spider there. I mean, I've gone into rooms and said, you know, one time the snakes and the spiders that were supposed to show up, the guy got stuck in traffic or something, and it was Friday, and the people came in, and this woman was just freaking out. And I said to her, why are you sad? And she goes, because you're going to bring out spiders. And I said, well, okay, you're sitting here, you're absolutely terrified. And she goes, I'm terrified. She goes, I know I'm going to run out of the room. And I said, well, you're going to have to wait. And she went, what? And I said, the spiders aren't here. But what does this tell you? It tells you you're not afraid of spiders. You're afraid of the idea of spiders. Easiest thing to change is ideas. Once she shrank that down, blinked at black and white a few times, then when we brought out the spider, 20 minutes later, she's holding a spider in her hand, the size of my hand. And, you know, and I've done this over and over again for years. I've done it everywhere. But, you know, if you have somebody that's completely schizophrenic and they're not in touch with reality, you don't talk to them and a bunch of other schizophrenics to find out. You talk to the people that bring them to you. I do it. You know, I've been both, you know, think of the same thing, that, you know, one is delusional about it, the other isn't, the shrink. And I go, well, I find out how the shrink is thinking and teach the other person to do it. I had one that if they fantasized something, they thought it really happened. So they were absolutely sure they killed their parents. Right. And when I asked the shrink, I said, did you kill your parents? And he went, of course not. And I said, well, think that you did. And he went like this. And I said, did you think it? And he goes, yeah. And I said, so how do you know that you made that up and you didn't make up the other one? And he told me it had a black border around it. So I hypnotized the schizophrenic and put black borders around all the things that were fantasized, so that when they went back in their memory, this one had a border and this one didn't. And so then I said, did you kill your parents? And they went, no, this is an hour later. Right. And, you know, they'd been going on about this for 8 years, you know, and they'd have lunch with their parents. And then 20 minutes later, they'd be going, I killed my parents. So, you know, that your ability to teach people what they don't know is what's important. NLP functions by educating, not by therapizing. You know, it's not another therapy. I read in the Merriam-Webster dictionary that NeuroLinguistic Programming is a self-help system. It is not. Okay, and I know that because I made it up. And
they didn't ask you.
No. The Oxford English Dictionary did. The Oxford English Dictionary describes it as what it is, but apparently the Webster Dictionary people don't read the Oxford English Dictionary. That they, you know, I don't know where they got this idea from, but it's not how I help myself. That isn't what it's for. It's a tool to educate people to control their neurology better. Yeah. Their consciousness better and their unconscious better. And that when you have neural synapses that are running and getting you to engage in stupid behavior, you know, the best thing about discovering that you're doing something stupid is that that's the moment at which you become smart. And if you realize you're doing something stupid, you can stop it. And when you stop it, then you become a smart person, because it's not that you are a stupid person. It's that you're doing something stupid, you know, and freaking out about spiders that aren't in the room is just stupid. And if you look at a spider and you make a giant picture of a spider the size of a lobster and have it jump at you every time you see a little spider running across the floor, that's just not useful. Right now, you know, and if you build uncertainty every time you lock the door, you'll become a compulsive, right? If you wash your hands and go, well, there might be invisible dirt, and you wash your hands again and you become a compulsive. So if you can realize how people feel finished, and you can teach people to do these things, you teach them the way somebody else thinks. So now my hands are clean, I'm done. Now it's time to dry them and walk out of the room, so you don't end up taking the skin off your hands. Yeah. And when psychiatrists were bringing me clients, right, they would always come in with their, you know, case histories and all these long stories. And what they didn't realize is that all of these ideas it's a list of all the ideas that didn't help. And, you know, knowing the name of something doesn't make it go away. Knowing that you fell in a river when you were 4 years old. You got a lot of people that had water phobias. They fell in a river when they were young, almost drowned. Somebody pulled them out. And slowly over the years, they became afraid of more and more things that had water, to the point where some of them would only take a sponge bath. I mean, the movie Jaws came out and scared the crap out of people. And there were a lot of people that couldn't go in a swimming pool or a bathtub, right? Because they overgeneralized that sense. And when you overgeneralize, the NLP is designed to pull it back and replace it with something else. Your brain has to go, not this, this.
Yeah. Of all the change work you've done, what was one of those sessions that like stuck out, where you learned the most from, or that fascinated you the most?
Well, I think the most fascinating thing that ever happened is a psychiatrist brought me in this person, and the person had some big, gigantic problem. And, you know, they overthought it, because it was probably from the shrink's office to my house was probably about an hour and 20-minute trip. And the whole time, the doctor kept calling and telling me they were late, that they'd gotten lost along the way, because I lived in a pretty remote area. And he kept talking to the client, and then the client, and he says to him, I know this is a big deal, you know, don't worry, Richard's got time today, you'll be able to see him. When he walked in the door, he sat down, and I looked at him, and I said, first thing he said to me is, he said, are you going to hypnotize me? And I said, if necessary, of course. But first thing I wanted you to know is that this is a really huge, terrible problem, wasn't it? And he blinked 3 times and looked at me, and I said, is it possible for you to tell me what the problem is? And he started going like this, and he goes, I know what it is, but something was really bothering me. And in an instant, he had amnesia. And so the shrink, in his infinite wisdom, started to tell the client, like, you know, because they'd been working on this for a couple of years. And when he told the client goes, no, I don't think that's right. And the two of them sat there arguing about whether or not he had a problem. That in a few minutes, he ended up having amnesia. I don't even know what the problem was, because he never could remember it. And even when the shrink explained it to him, the guy just didn't believe him. He goes, no, that couldn't have been it. He says, that doesn't sound like me. And they sat there arguing. And the lesson that I learned from this is, when you blow pictures out of proportion, clients even say that they got a problem, I've blown out of proportion. When the pictures are larger than life and too big in your head, once they shrink down, they seem so unimportant. You know what happened, but it just doesn't seem like a problem anymore. You know, many of the films that you saw of me doing things, I'm not doing anything that complicated, but I actually listen to what people say. Yeah. Right. I don't distort it. I don't make it fit a theory. If they tell me, I've got a problem I'm too close to, then I push it away. If it's too big, I shrink it down. If they tell me they have this voice telling them something, then I change the voice so it tells them something else. Yeah. Right? Like shut the fuck up, something like that.
It's about what is important, basically, to focus on what's important. What's important to you? Like in life, what would you say is like living a successful life?
Well, living a successful life is that when there are things that you want, you put your energies towards doing them. I've written 32 books for myself. I've written some for other people. Yeah. And, I started out, I did Fritz Perl's last 2 books. And that to be able to start a book and finish a book, you have to have something in your brain that keeps in mind what you're doing, where you're going, and gets it done. Yeah. And to me, manifesting things, finishing things, when you start washing the dishes, stopping halfway through, right, it just makes it more work. If you wash all the dishes and put them away, sometimes I go in the kitchen, I stick things, I'll stick something in the microwave and I'll look over at the sink and go, there's a few dishes. If I wash them now, instead of let them build up, I get it done. That to me, successful living is when you figure out what you want to accomplish and you put all your energy into getting it done instead of getting in your own way because you let your thoughts stop you from actually acting in the world. There are people that tell me, that they're terrified of water and they always want to learn to swim, right? And they never try. There are people that tell me they want to write a book and they never did. And, I had a guy that I worked with for a couple of years and he kept coming up to me and saying, because I really want to meet a woman. And I said, well, let's see, there's 2.5 billion of them running around out there. Right. Now there's even more, but this was a long time ago. They seem to multiply. And I said, have you tried just walking up and talking to him? And he looked at me like I had said, go slap a grizzly bear, I'm sorry, but, there are some women that are unpleasant, but they're not really that dangerous that walking across the room and saying hello should be that big a deal. But it was to him because he'd made it so in his mind. And he even said to me at one point, he said, I'm thinking of going out on a date next fall. It was January. And when he said that to me, I burst out laughing. And I said, look, would you like me to help you? Right? Because there are certain things I could talk to you about and this would all get easier. Yeah. And he said to me, he goes, I don't really want to change anything about myself. And when people decide that, the way they think is real instead of it's the way they think, they get into trouble. To me, I always try to make it so that if the way I'm thinking isn't working, I try to think something else. I'm by nature a problem solver. If something doesn't work, I try to make it work. And if I don't, I call the guy who can. I used to try to fix everything myself, and I've discovered that leads to more damage sometimes. For example, I shouldn't be trusted with plumbing. I'm not a plumber, right? There are certain things I can fix and certain things that really not in my wheelhouse. I used to know everything about fixing a car, but now when I open the hood, it's all electronic. I just don't know anything about these new cars. Yeah. I drive one. I don't like a lot about it. My car sends me emails. I think that's weird, personally. I get emails from my car telling me my left tire is low in air. And, and my car isn't even going anywhere. It's not even turned on. It's sitting in the garage thinking without me.
But it knows.
Yeah, but it knows, which could be, which is a good thing in a way, because I might not notice myself. But, there's so much electronic about cars that now when I need something done, I take my car somewhere. Yeah. Knowing what's the efficient use of your time. If you try to do everything yourself, it's way too much work. Yeah. And, there are some times, and part of what a neurolinguistic programmer offers people is a way to know that, to know this is worth going through all the trouble to do. Yeah. And, you don't want to have to become an automobile mechanic. It may not be an efficient use of my time. I'm almost 70 years old. My time would be better writing another book. My time would be better doing something that no one else can do and getting paid a lot of money for it than sitting in my garage, trying to figure out what this electronic thing does. I mean, there are components in my car. I used to be able to take an engine apart and put it back together. Yeah. And when I looked in under the hood of my car, I'm not even sure which way the engine's facing. Okay, so, you know, it doesn't mean that I have to learn to do everything myself. I have an engineer in my studio because he's very good at doing things, can do it very quickly, and I can concentrate on my job. Yeah. Now, there's some times where you want to learn how things work, in which case you need to think like him, not like me. And understanding that this just makes it easier. If you're going to learn to do something, if you're going to learn to do art, you need to think like an artist because it will be less frustrating and you will enjoy yourself more. Yeah. And your art will look better.
2 final questions for the NLP community. What makes a good NLP practitioner for you?
Training. And you have to be careful who trains you. You know, this is not something, and I've gone to great lengths to make sure this is not regulated by governments because they do such a bad job, right? You go in and 2 dentists have the same certificate and one could fix your teeth and the other not so much. And, you know, that to me, you know, there are absolutely fabulous chiropractors, and there are ones that I wouldn't let touch me with a camera from 5 miles away. And so, you know, you always have to look at what they've accomplished. You look at the people they've trained to see if they've trained good people. Yeah. That's how you go from being provisional trainer with me to being a real trainer. We look at your students. We look at your videos to see what you're doing. Yeah. We try to make sure that people know all the things that you need to know currently. Yeah. I'll be perfectly honest with you. There are thousands of people stuck at various levels of my development. Don't be one of them. Go to people who have been trained currently and that know the current things, because things are getting easier, not harder. Yeah. And it's not that you have to go and make all the mistakes I did to learn everything I know. I know how to do things a lot quicker than I know how to do 40 years ago. Why would you want to go back and do what I did 40 years ago? I tell people when you read my book, start with the last one and read towards the first one, you know, because by the time you get to the early ones, you're going, this sounds like a lot of crap, you know, because progress is supposed to be evolution. And NLP is a very evolutionary tool. So you want to make sure that and if I were you, I'd make sure it's my signature on the certificate. And because I sign every one of them in ink. None of them are mimeographed. None of them are copied. It's a real ink certificate. So when I go to see my trainer, I want to see that on the wall, and I want to make sure. Because pretty much anybody with a printer can declare themselves an NLP trainer. Doesn't mean they know anything. So I'd want to know who they were trained with and how many times and how much training they have. Because you can't take a prac course once and know everything. Nobody does that. You know, the people who get good at this have been through it a number of times. They've been through the master prac a number of times. Then, because a lot of people go, I'm going to take the prac in the summer. At the end of the summer, I'm going to take the master track, and then I'm going to take the trainer's training, and then I'm going to go be a trainer. Yeah. Excuse me, you need to see clients for a couple of years so that you know how this works. You need to build up a repertoire of skills, right? This is as much an art form and a set of skills, and it's got a huge amount of information involved, and you have to use it. You know, I mean, you know, you don't read a book about neurosurgery and go do it. That's not a good idea. And when somebody is affecting your brain and the way you think, you want somebody who's good at it. And if they're going to teach you how to do this with other people, you want them to know what they're doing. So you want to know that they've been trained and that they go back and update their training and they read books and they know what the hell they're talking about. I would be very careful. You can always call the society and ask. We keep track of these things.
They do.
I want all of you to read some books, a lot of books. The more you read, the smarter you get. Not just books on NLP, books on neurology. Read about what goes on. And if you're in one field, read things from other fields. It will make you smarter. And if you want to get good training and you're from where he's from, he's a good example of what would make a good trainer. Remember this.